Okay, I think it's 5:30. Sorry, 11:15. We have a class tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. in Baras Hall, 123A. And we will next week also we will have a class on Thursday. So I think that will make up 4 classes. And after the break, if we have one more class and you have exam outside the class period, like you have a second test outside the class period, so that will take care of, or that will make up the classes I missed in the beginning of this semester. Okay, the assignment that I'm circulating now, it asks you to, well, it used to be to go to the library, but now you don't have to because all of the journals are available online. So it asks you to download a paper from one of the journals. In the parentheses, it gives you the number of pages that must be in that paper. So you cannot just download a paper of 1 page or 2 page length. I mean, the length is specified depending upon the font size the journal uses. Okay, so that's why the length of the paper is different because different journals have different font size.
I thought it was an indication of how much math was in that journal.
No, there is no indication of that. No, that does not indicate. The number of pages, roughly speaking, no, I cannot be precise in it. Because the font size is different in different journals, therefore the length of the paper or the number of words or equations you will see will be different. So that's why it says some journals 6 pages, some journals 10 pages. Okay, so the numbers in the parentheses indicates the number of pages the paper must have. You will not be quizzed on the contents of the paper. So all you have to do is take a marker and underline every term that is in the paper that you have seen in the class, except is, is, are, and any term related to continuum mechanics. Okay. Any term related to continuum mechanics that you have seen in the class, or you should have seen because if you were absent on that day, that term was still covered. And I assume you either read the book or listened to the lecture or copy notes from your friend's notes. So you are familiar with or you are aware of the contents. Because you have a test, I think on December 2nd or 3rd. And there is no excuse for, if you missed a class, you are still responsible for knowing what was covered in that period. Anything else on your mind? There will be one more assignment, I think.
Okay.
Because we have one assignment due on Friday, and this one is due after Thanksgiving. So when do you want the other one to be due? There is one, I think there will be at least one more assignment. Well, maybe I should say one more assignment. So you tell me when you want it to be due, and I will make it accordingly. I have not made it yet. So one possibility is to have it due Friday before Thanksgiving. The other possibility is to have it due Monday, like December 8th or 9th, something like that. So which one is your preference? And people at Wake Forest can, or Kunz at Oak Ridge can also give their input.
December.
So December the 8th, I guess.
Sure.
Is that, are you comfortable with that? Okay, so I will try to make up and give you enough time for that assignment. So Josh has some fancy stuff, that foam thing. What is it? Huh?
Even the hot press.
Oh.
You've seen these. Steel.
Oh, okay. Or at least I should have seen it.
You weren't paying attention at ARL?
ARL stands for Army Research Lab, those of you who are not familiar with it. Okay, so last time we were trying to find the maximum shear stress. And we took our coordinate planes or coordinate axes along the principal axis of a stress tensor at a point. We are at a point in a body. So at a point, we know the Cauchy stress tensor, we found its eigenvalues and eigenvectors. The eigenvectors give you the normal to the planes on which the normal stresses are maximum or minimum. And there are no shear stresses on those planes, so those planes are principal planes. And eigenvalues of the Cauchy stress tensor are principal stresses, not of the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor, not of the second Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. Cauchy stress tensor. If a material fails, it fails because of the limiting value of the Cauchy stress tensor, or one of the components of the Cauchy stress tensor, not first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor, not second Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. Second Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor has no physical meaning, but we use it for mathematical convenience. However, the Cauchy stress tensor does have a physical meaning, and these are the true stresses. So what we found was that the maximum shear stress on a plane whose normal has components 1 over square root of 2, 1 over square root of 2, and 0, because we assumed M3 was 0, is given by this. And if you now take the case when N1 is 0, then you will get N2 equal to plus minus 1 over square root of 2, and N3 equal to plus minus 1 over square root of 2, and T shear will come out to be 1 over 2 lambda 2, I think, minus lambda 3. So the plane of maximum shear bisects the principal planes. Bisects means it divides the angle into 1/2. Is halfway between the two principal planes. And we have another choice, because we have had N3 equal to 0, N1 equal to 0, we could also have N2 equal to 0. So that will give us N3 equal to plus minus 1 over square root of 2, and N1 equal to plus minus 1 over square root of 2, and then T shear will be 1/2 lambda 3 minus lambda 1. So we have three values of maximum shear stress depending upon the plane we choose. So there are three planes. The reason I'm saying only three, there are really 6 planes, because here you have a choice of, you can choose plus 1 over 2 square root 2 and minus 1 over square root 2. Plus 1 over square root 2 and plus 1 over square root 2. But the magnitude of the shear stress remains the same. So what is the maximum shear stress then on any plane passing through that point? We are focusing on one point in the body. There is no assurance that the maximum shear stress acts on parallel planes at all points. There is no guarantee that the eigenvectors and eigenvalues of the Cauchy stress tensor are same at every point. Okay? So what is the maximum shear stress at a point then? We have any volunteer? Yes, Islam? Could you please press that button?
When lambda 3 is positive and lambda 1 is negative.
Not quite. Not quite. I mean, No, that's not the answer. No. Ganesh,
Can you just repeat the question also?
what is the maximum shear stress at a point? Answer is on the screen. Or I should say there is enough information on the screen to give an answer or to answer this question. I think Pierce is focusing on the screen now. So yes, yourself. Oh, I thought you know it.
If you consider largest and the lowest one, that's among three values.
I don't know if I quite fully understood what you said. Okay. So there is one value here, second value here, and third value here. All of these three are at the same point. So it's the largest of these three numbers. It's the largest of these three numbers. So I cannot say which one of the three is largest, because I have to really look at find all three of them. Right? So at a point, to find the maximum shear stress, we should compute all three values. Like we should compute lambda 1 minus lambda 2, 1/2, lambda 2 minus lambda 3, 1/2, and lambda 3 minus lambda 1, 1/2, where lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, these are the eigenvalues of the Cauchy stress tensor at that point. And I keep on emphasizing the word point, 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 because we are at one point in the body. The stress at a point in your foot is quite different from the stress at a point in your, say, mouth or brain or arm. Okay, they may not be different by orders of magnitude, but they are different. Certainly the stress at a point in the foot is considerably more than that at a point in my brain. Why? Foot is carrying the weight, so it's carrying my mass, right? Okay, so it has to have more stress. Unfortunately, my foot is flatter, so it can bear that stress. Okay, so a material can fail, even though we are not studying a failure theory. A material can fail either the maximum normal stress there has exceeded a limiting value, and that limiting value depends upon the material, or the maximum shear stress has exceeded the limiting value, or a suitable combination of these. For example, in a composite, a suitable combination of these has exceeded the limiting value. Okay. Now, the next question is, we have studied how many balance laws or conservation laws? 4. Good. So what are they?
Mass, momentum, linear momentum, and energy.
Yes, good, Islam. So balance of mass, balance of linear momentum, balance of momentum, and balance of energy. And what did we call balance of energy? Yeah, first law of thermodynamics. So if we said first law of thermodynamics, there must be something called second law of thermodynamics. Otherwise, we won't say first law. Okay, so now we want to talk about the second law of thermodynamics. And I think I have already asked that question, how many of you took a course in thermodynamics, and not many of you raised hands. You have a question? No. Okay, so now, again we are in the present shape of the body, and we look at this part P. The second law of thermodynamics is not an equality. It is not equal something. It says heat cannot flow from a body at a lower temperature to a body at a higher temperature unless you do work on the system, or you cannot flow water from a lower level to a higher level unless you do some work on the system. So it's really it's a statement of irreversibility. Okay, things can go in one direction, but if you want them to go in the opposite direction, you have to do some work on the body. So this statement is not precise, the one I just spoke. We are, as probably you have realized by now, we are dealing with mathematics, because this is the language, mathematics is the language in which we can communicate without causing any confusion. It's a precise statement, A equal to B. No two of us can misunderstand it. And that's basically what we are doing now. So we have to translate whatever I just said. Heat cannot flow from a body at a lower temperature to a body at a higher temperature without doing some work on it into something more concrete, which is in the form of an equation or an inequality. So we will define something called entropy, which we cannot feel, we cannot see, and we cannot measure. So it's something you can say abstract. I cannot say that you can see stars either. Okay. So this part P has entropy, let's say per unit mass. Therefore, the rate of change of entropy eta is this Greek symbol eta. This Greek symbol eta is the entropy per unit mass. That rho you are seeing is the mass density or mass per unit volume, and dV is the volume. And as I said before, this is a statement of irreversibility. That means that the rate of change of entropy on this part is at least equal to. So this entropy of the body can increase or can change because of something happening at a distance, which is the interaction between two bodies not touching each other. So that's what we call supply of entropy. And we are going to say that this S is the supply of entropy per unit mass. Is similar to the supply of energy. When we said R is the energy because of radiation, and we said R was energy per unit mass, and here also we are saying S is the supply of entropy per unit mass. Plus, we could be changing the entropy of the body because of the interaction between the shaded area and the unshaded area, and that is contact. So let's call it H hat dA, and that's coming through the surface, contact surface. So this statement is a statement of second law of thermodynamics. So this is a statement of the second law of thermodynamics, that the rate of change of entropy in a body is greater than or equal to the entropy supply plus the entropy flux. This quantity is the entropy flux, and this is the supply of entropy. So this is second law of thermodynamics for us. This is not what you will see in an undergraduate book. You will not see this in an undergraduate book. Whereas the material we studied till day before yesterday was discovered or proposed before 1900. This thing is now we are talking about something that was proposed in 1900s. So we have advanced. Now we are only 100 years back, roughly. Previously we were 200 or 300 years back. So we are not still what is being done in the field right now. Okay? Like what is being done or what was done 5 years ago. We are not there yet, and we will not be there in this class. If you are interested, you can take nonlinear elasticity. After that will be in spring 2010. But there also we will be somewhere in like 1940s, roughly World War II period, but not the Iraq war period or the Afghanistan war period. We will still be 50, 60 years behind. And part of the reason is because of my age, so I don't know what is going on now also. So okay, so now what about this second law of thermodynamics then? We had a Cauchy postulate. So what was Cauchy postulate about the heat flux or the surface traction? Yeah, it's almost there, not quite, but the entropy flux at a point depends upon the orientation of the surface only through the outward normal. The entropy flux H, entropy is a scalar quantity. Okay, so that's why we are not putting any tilde underneath. So the entropy flux at a point depends upon the orientation of the surface only through the outward normal. And then if we go through the like pillbox argument and the tetrahedron argument, we can show that this is indeed a linear function of n. Oh, no, this thing. If you change the direction of n, then you change the sign of h. Previously we put this sign here. So it's the same thing. So we had written h of x minus n equals minus of h x n. Right? This is nothing. Okay, so now we are coming a little bit closer in time, like 1910 or so. So there the assumption is that this H is given by the heat flux Q at that point divided by the absolute temperature, theta. This is not the temperature that your thermometer will measure if you put it in your mouth. So that is like 98.4 or 98.1 or 97.9 Fahrenheit. This is absolute temperature. Absolute temperature cannot be zero. I mean, you can rarely, I don't think you can reach zero. So this is positive. So theta here is absolute temperature. It's nothing to do with the fever, if I have fever or not. So its absolute temperature is always positive, otherwise I could not be dividing by theta. So we have a thermometer that can measure the absolute temperature. Of course, if you know it in centigrades, you can add 273 to it, and you can get the absolute temperature. If you know it in Fahrenheit, you first convert Fahrenheit to centigrade, and then add 273 to it. So the problem is if you want to get 0 degree absolute, then you really have to go to minus 273 Celsius, which is not easy. And I think Fred and Pierce can probably vouch for that. It's not easy to go to minus 273. However, in molecular mechanics simulations, we assume many times, I should really say often, that we are at 0 degree Kelvin, or 0 Kelvin, no degree, 0 Kelvin. In Kelvin, we don't say degrees, we just say 0 Kelvin. Whereas we say 35 degrees centigrade or 28 degree Fahrenheit, but in Kelvin, we just say 0 Kelvin. So this is absolute temperature, and I'm not telling you how to measure it. Also about this S, the entropy supply, that is we are going to take as R, the heat flux supply over temperature. Again, the absolute temperature. So these two are assumptions. With these assumptions, we can simplify our entropy inequality or the second law of thermodynamics.
What's R again?
R was the supply of internal energy or supply of energy, that radiation term we had in the balance of energy.
Okay, same term.
It's the same R. This Q is the same Q, heat flux. This Q, oh, there is one thing wrong though. There should have been an N here, and then generally we put a minus sign. See, this H is a scalar quantity. I had put Q as a vector heat flux, so that is dotted with N. So there is no N inside, and it's dotted with N. So let me rewrite it since I goofed too much. So this H tilde is R, H tilde is minus Q dot N over theta, and S is R over theta. So these are the assumptions we are making. If we make these assumptions, then this entropy inequality is called Clausius. That's the name of a person. Duhem is the name of a person. These are two different persons. So this is called Clausius-Duhem inequality. And if we have time, I will show you that this inequality implies thermal conductivity must be positive and give you some results that you are familiar with. So it's not a waste of your time. Remember, everything in the world must obey second law of thermodynamics. I cannot move from here to Norris Hall without obeying the second law of thermodynamics. So whatever problems we solve in continuum mechanics must obey second law of thermodynamics. They must be consistent with this entropy inequality. So it's not a trivial matter. Ganesh is surprised that, hey, why is he saying that?
I'm wondering which one is the inequality? The first equation that you wrote with the differentiation, that is what is Clausius-Duhem inequality?
Once I plug this in that, then it will become Clausius-Duhem inequality. I'm going to write that here now. So if we substitute for H hat or H tilde and S, we get the Clausius-Duhem inequality. Otherwise, that was entropy inequality. Both are called second law of thermodynamics. So this one is a special case of that because we have assumed a special form for S and H. One was proposed by Clausius and the other one was proposed by Duhem, so we call it Clausius-Duhem inequality. And every process in continuum mechanics must obey the Clausius-Duhem inequality or the second law of thermodynamics. It's a very strong statement, but that is true. Same thing, like everything moves according to Newton's laws of motion or Cauchy's laws of motion, same thing. Okay, now how can we simplify this? So that's the next part. So this one, first, of course, we have learned many times that this d over dt, I can take it inside. So that becomes rho eta dot. And on the second term, since you see Q dot n, like Qi, we can use the divergence theorem. We can use the divergence theorem to convert it to a volume integration. So that will become Qi over theta, comma I, and this is over part P. This little I means we are differentiating with respect to little x, not big X. We are differentiating with respect to little x. And now we can combine all these three terms and put it on one side. And since this has to hold for every part P, you can choose the part P you like, very small or very large. So what it really tells us is that rho eta dot minus rho r over theta plus Qi over theta dot comma I, and this thing should be greater than or equal to 0. Is it okay, or do I transferred every term to the left hand side, and since all of these are volume integration, so I can combine them, right? These are volume integrations, so we can combine them, and then the next thing is it must hold for every part P, therefore the integrand must be non-negative. And generally speaking, when the equality holds, the system is in equilibrium. Generally speaking, when the equality holds, the system is in equilibrium. Otherwise, it's in non-equilibrium. Now, we are not going to worry too much whether this is in equilibrium or not, and for us, this inequality must hold. Okay, now let's simplify this a little bit. So we have rho eta dot. The simplification means I'm going to differentiate this by parts. That's all. So minus rho r over theta minus Qi comma I over theta. Oh, no, this is plus, and this is minus Qi over theta square. Theta comma I should be greater than or equal to 0. All I did is this, I just used the chain rule of calculus to simplify this term. Okay, now let's recall the balance of energy or internal energy. The balance of internal energy. That's rho E dot minus Pij Bij minus Qi comma I minus rho r equal to 0. The bottom line I wrote is the balance of internal energy with every term written on the left hand side.
We're all of a sudden having a really hard time hearing you at Wake Forest.
Oh, sorry. Let me. Should I move around? Oh, let me. Okay. Is it better now?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. See, this microphone was a little off. I mean, it was sitting a little farther. Okay. Thanks for telling me. Okay. So now, this one is the balance of internal energy we derived, I think, on Thursday of last week when we were in Burroughs Hall. This one is the entropy inequality or the second law of thermodynamics. Again, as Islam said, this one, the balance of internal energy must hold too. Remember, balance of mass, balance of linear momentum, balance of moment of momentum, balance of internal energy, and now we are saying entropy inequality must hold. So all these 5 laws must hold, must, M-U-S-T. There is no choice. You cannot say one will hold, the other will not hold. So there is no if or buts. You cannot choose 1 out of 5 or 2 out of 5. All 5 must hold. Okay? If any one of the 5 is violated, that deformation is not possible in a continuous body. Yes?
I guess that QI, Y should be plus. So this is not
I think so, yes. You are right, yeah. Yes, she's right. This, yeah, thank you. This is plus. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, since theta is positive, I'm going to multiply each term here by theta. If you multiply by a positive number, you don't change the sign, you don't change the inequality. So I'm going to multiply each term by theta. And now I'm going to subtract one from the other. So to subtract, let me put this minus, plus, minus, plus. So I'm going to add the 2 now. If I add 0 to both sides, nothing, the sign of the equality will not change. So let's do that. So we get rho theta eta dot minus E dot plus Tij Dij, and this term cancels with that. And she saved my life because this term cancels with this. Right? So, and what we are left with is then minus Qi theta comma I is greater than or equal to 0. So we had like 4 terms in each. We are adding them up, so we should get 8 terms, but the ones with the green arrow cancel and one with the black tick mark, they cancel. Yes?
Need a denominator of beta.
Oh, I have a denominator on theta, right. Yeah, thank you. I do, yes. Have you heard of something called Helmholtz free energy?